Why does it feel like I read these books a year ago? Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Casey. Welcome if you're new, welcome back if you've been here before. And today we are going to go over my June wrap-up and my July TBR. June was not a productive month for me. Unfortunately, I got sick, I had brain fog, I could not focus. It took me a long time to get back into my reading in June. So unfortunately, this month, I only read 4 books, which is one less than my goal of 5, but usually I can do like up to 7. So I'm kind of disappointed, and this was not a good reading month in terms of the quality of the books I was reading either. So let's get into it. Spoiler alert for any and all of these books, I try not to go into too much detail as far as the plot when I do these book reviews, but if you want to go into a book blind, you may consider skipping the review that I give, but all of my videos are chaptered below for you. The first book that I read in June was Cruel is the Light by Sophie Clark. I read this as a book for the Quest game, which I play with Kim from Expedition Through Pages and Amy from A-Star Reads. It's a really good time. It's a lot of fun. If you don't know about it, I'll link a video down below so you can see. And this was a prompt for set in the future. This is set in like 2027, so it's a very near future, but set in the future. And also for my library card game, it was a romance book, I believe, with a castle on the cover. This is not a castle. This is the Vatican, which I did not know until I got into reading the book, so my bad. And I just want to say, this Fairy Loot Young Adult edition of Cruel is the Light is so beautiful. Without the cover on it, it might be the most beautiful book I own. I just think this book is so gorgeous. Despite not loving the actual story, I think I'm going to keep this book forever just because of how pretty it is. Like I mentioned, this book was out of a Fairy Loot box. It was the January book for this year, and I'm not very good at reading new releases, so I didn't get around to it until June. And the story itself, Cruel is the Light, is a romantasy young adult story, though I would say it teeters on the edge of new adult, being that there is a spicy scene in this book. This book explores a post-apocalyptic Europe where the Vatican's exorcists are battling against demons that walk amongst us on Earth. Our main characters are Celine, an exorcist of the Vatican, and Jules, a military deserter. Jules has the unfortunate event crossing Belial, who is the Duke of Briar's, one of the top demons. And Belial is on Earth to attack an orphanage and seek out information that turns out to be about Jules. And Jules is there also looking for information about his birth family. After a battle with Belial, Celine takes Jules back with her to the Vatican, making a deal with him that he can use the Vatican libraries to try to find more information about his birth family. And they're going to do so by passing Jules off as Elliot, who was exiled years ago. And Elliot just happens to be Celine's former fiancé. I would like to tell you more about the plot of this book, but there really isn't much to it. It's more tropes than plot. The main plot point in this book is who is Jules Lacroix, and what kind of corruption is taking place at the Vatican. And the rest of the book primarily focuses on the relationship between Celine and Jules, but it wasn't one of my favorite relationships. I was really not vibing with their chemistry. This is one of those books that's annoying in telling you how hot the characters are and how they think each other are very hot and just being hot together in the same place at the same time, and that for some reason deems that they should be together. There isn't really much else that connects them, in my opinion, at least not in this book. This is the first book in a duology. But it really is that they're hot and in the same place at the same time, and that's just why they have to be together. Something I did really enjoy about this book was all the action scenes. It was giving me Constantine vibes. There were a lot of battles between Celine and demons. And I love a book with angels and demons, so sign me up. But sadly, that's just not what this book delivered for the majority of the story. In my opinion, this is more of a plain Jane romantasy than anything to do with fantasy. And not much happens in this book until the very end, which kind of did save this book for me, or else it would have gotten a way lower rating. And this is also a very predictable plain Jane fantasy. Just about everything in this plot I was able to point out from the start. This world could have been really interesting, the magic could have been really interesting, I wanted to know where the demons came from, but sadly the book never really goes into those details, at least not in this one. There's so many plot points in this book that don't really go anywhere, like Celine's twin brother who has been in exile, Anastasia Romanoff being the leader of the demons. You might want to elaborate on that. You don't just throw her in there like that. But like I mentioned, this is the first in a duology, and maybe we see more of those things explored in the second book, but I'm not sure. I'm willing to read it to find out. I only rated Cruel is the Light 2.75 stars. If you're a romantasy reader, you might enjoy this book more than I did. This book has enemies to lovers, the one bed trope, fake dating, a ball for no reason, a flirty fight scene, so if you're into those kind of things, you might like this book more than I did. And as I mentioned, even though this book is advertised as young adult, I think it's more new adult, being that there is a spicy scene in there. That's not really something I would want to give to somebody under the age of 17. The writing in this book is dual POV, and it can be kind of difficult to read through at times because it doesn't really establish whose POV it is when another person would take over. So I listened to this book mostly on audiobook, so if you do have access to it, I think that's the better way to experience the story. The second book that I read in June was Madhouse at the End of the Earth by Julian Sancton. I think that's how you say his name. This is an adventure and survival story that details the voyage of the Belgica in 1897, which was a voyage from Belgium to Antarctica to try and chart the uncharted continent. The prompt that I read this book for was from the Quest game. We had a random continent generator and got Antarctica of all places. And I expected a lot of this book. I thought with a title like Madhouse at the End of the Earth that things on the ship are going to go absolutely bonkers, but instead of going bonkers and cannibalism and crazy and murder and mutiny, it went really solemn, bleak, and depressing, like Antarctica. Which I guess I should have known, but just because of the title, I think I was expecting something more intense. And this book was fine. I gave this book 3 stars. It was fine. I learned things. I learned of a story I'd never heard of before. It was okay. If you like adventure stories, you might enjoy this book more than I did. And I gotta say, if Murphy's Law was a story, it would be this story. Everything that could go wrong for this voyage did go wrong. And for the captain to be like, no, we're not leaving. We're just going to go ahead and get stuck in this ice that I know we're about to get stuck in because I'm not done with what I'm doing. That was madness, truly. But this book drug on and on and on and on and on. It was a 13.5-hour book. This book just kept going and going and going. And just the bleak and darkness that they were experiencing was not fun to read or listen to. Listening to them to have scurvy was not fun. This book is dark, so if you need a dark, bleak winter book, this might be a good book for you. The third book I read in June was What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. This is the first book in a duology, The Secrets of the Nile series. I did use this book for 2 different prompts. One being from my library card game, a series with a reptile on the cover, and the second for the Buzzwordathon and Coverathon challenge. I used it for both the buzzword and the cover prompt. The buzzword being memory words, and nose was cited as a word that you could use for a memory word, and then celestial objects, you could see it has a moon, a sun, and little stars, so totally counts for celestial. I am also using it for a different prompt for the quest game for the round in June, July, August, that little era for a free pick. This was my pick. And What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez is a young adult historical mystery with a sprinkle of magic on top. Set in 1884 and following a young woman named Inez from Argentina to Egypt, we follow her as she learns of the death of her parents in Egypt, where they've spent half of the year, all her life, leaving her behind with family. Inez is rightfully upset that her parents have passed away and wants to know more about what has happened to them, so she voyages to Egypt. Upon arriving in Egypt, her uncle Ricardo really doesn't want her there and sends his assistant, Mr. Hayes, to send her back immediately to Argentina, but Inez gives him the slip and ends up meeting her uncle in the hotel. Now, Inez has brought along with her an artifact that her father had sent to her before he died. It is a magic golden ring that belonged to Cleopatra, and the magic kind of rubs off onto her, the magic that was imbued in the ring. Meeting Mr. Whitford Hayes upon her arrival in Egypt, he immediately begins flirting with her, which was so off for the time period for me. It's already weird in 1884 that a young woman is traveling. She's 19. A young woman is traveling on her own. She is pretending to be a widow to avoid ruining her reputation, and then he just starts flirting with her out in the open in front of everybody. And his dialogue and behavior throughout this book is so off place for me. He says "for fuck's sake" so many times, and that did not belong in 1884. Now, Ricardo again insists that Inez returns to Argentina, but instead she sneaks onto his boat disguised as a crew member, and when it's revealed that she's on the boat, she also reveals to her uncle Ricardo that she is having these visions of Cleopatra, and he thinks she could be useful in discovering Cleopatra's tomb. This book tries to have a romance between Inez and Whit, but I was never really buying it. I'm just such a hater on romance sometimes, but I was never really buying it. It came off as an infatuation on Inez's part. This romance was unreciprocated by Mr. Hayes for the most part. Yes, he's flirting with her, but her infatuation with him was much more than his liking of her, and he is engaged to somebody else back home in Britain, so it was really inappropriate for him to be flirting with her at all. The things that Inez likes about Mr. Hayes, like the things that she thinks makes him like her hero or whatever, are things he's being paid to do, to protect her, to defend her, to stand up for her, to watch out for her. This is not an organic match. Through the entire book, there was really only one scene towards the end where I felt any kind of chemistry between them, so I've seen more chemistry with rocks. But thankfully, that's not really why I enjoyed reading this book or why I kept on reading it to the end. For me, this book is all about the setting. In Egypt, I loved it. I loved the heat, the desert, the palms, the mysteries, the architecture, the dig sites. I loved all of that. I love the mystery surrounding Cleopatra and her tomb, though I don't really think it would in real life play out the way it did in this book, let's say that. This book makes a really good point of artifacts staying in their home country and not being sold off to foreign museums or private collectors. And I really did appreciate that in this book, that it was such a focal point for Inez and Ricardo. My favorite character in this book was Elvira. That is Inez's cousin. She reminded me so much of Alice Cullen, and I really enjoyed her in this book, even though she wasn't in it very much. I rated What the River Knows 3.25 stars, and I liked it just enough to read the sequel, which is Where the Library Hides, and I've already ordered it, so I look forward to reading that eventually. And this book is another one that's marketed as young adult, but there is like a spicy kind of steamy makeout scene in this book and a lot of violence, so keep that in mind if you're going to be gifting to a younger reader. The fourth and final book that I read in June was The Road to Oz, the fifth book in the Wizard of Oz series by L. Frank Baum. This is a bind-up, the second volume of the Oz books that contains books 4, 5, and 6, but I just read book 5. The prompt that I had for this book was a fantasy set in a different country from my library card game. And I just have a feeling that these books are getting worse and worse. I rated this book 2 stars. I did not love it. The first 3 books in the Oz series were so good. And the last one, the book 4, what's that one called? Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz, book 4, was not good, 2 stars. The Road to Oz, book 5, the one I just read, not very good, 2 stars. I get a feeling he really lost passion for writing this series and was really only continuing it because fans were asking him to, but you can really feel that in these books. If I could sum this book up, it would be like Dorothy, Toto, a homeless guy, a kidnapped child, and a dancing bag of Skittles went on an adventure to walk to Oz. Even though you couldn't walk to Oz before, and Dorothy couldn't walk back to Kansas in the first book, so she had to go see the Wizard of Oz, but because Ozma wiggled her nose or whatever, now you can magically walk to Oz. I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. I'm not the target audience for these books, but I did find the first 3 so good, so I'm disappointed that I'm not liking the rest of them. And I do have the whole series, so we're in it for the long haul, you guys. So just to sum it up, the best book that I read in June, a really crappy reading month, was What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. And the worst book that I read in June was The Road to Oz by L. Frank Baum. Sad. Sad. I don't want that to be the case. Now let's move on to my July TBR. If you watched my library card video, you know that I am in for it for the next 3 months. If you haven't, I'll leave it in the cards right here-ish, I think. Or here-ish. Is it here-ish? I'll leave it right here-ish, I think is where it goes. So I unfortunately pulled a punishment in my library card game that required me to read books 500 pages or more only. So I have quite a few of those on my TBR this month, so let's get into it. So I'm going to start with a book that I have started, and that is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I'm about 100 pages in, so I just started this one, and I'm really enjoying it so far. This book is a modern reimagining of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, but it takes place in America, it takes place in the Appalachians, it takes place in Southwest Virginia. And our main character, Damon, also known as Demon, It is a coming of age story for him, and he has been born to a mother who is less than stellar in her behavior. She has issues with alcohol and drugs. She's 18 when she's pregnant. She's smoking Pall Malls on the porch, and he has a rough birth. He was stuck inside his embryonic sac when he was born and almost didn't survive. And Damon is really close with his neighbors. His best friend Maggot lives next door. His name is Maddie Peggett, so he calls him Maggot. His mom remarries while he's out with the Peggets visiting a family member, remarries a man that's lovingly known as Stoner, and this man is a psycho-abusive asshole. Stoner hates Damon with a passion and is abusive towards Damon's mom. This all comes to a head when Damon's mom relapses and overdoses, and he is yoinked out of his family home and put into foster care on a farm. That is what I know so far. I'm only 100 pages in, but it is so well written. I started listening to this on audiobook, and the sound, the twang, the language, everything sounded like my mom's family. My mom's family is from that part of Virginia, so this sounds like family reunions to me. I have a lot of dysfunctional family just like this. This book really appeals to me, and it is a 5-star prediction, so here's hoping. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this, but the prompts for this book from the quest game is a book with a white cover. This is white and rainbow. I think I'm actually going to also use this as one of the prompts for Herkid for a book with a 7+ color cover. I think I'm going to be using this for that because it is a perfect rainbow cover. I'm using this book in my library card game as well as a literary fiction book with insects, spiders, or butterflies on the cover. Oh, there he is. I don't know if you can see, but there is a spider there. There's also butterflies here. So perfect for that prompt, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Another book I plan on reading in July, and I am cuckoo chaos for doing this, but that will be The Fiery Cross by Diana Gabaldon. This is the 5th book in the Outlander series, and it is huge. It is over 1,400 pages, but I recently read, 2 months ago I think, I read book number 4 in this series, Drums of Autumn. I had a great time with it, and I would like to dive back in to this series. Now, the prompt from my library card game for this was a historical fiction book with a time travel aspect to it. We know Claire is a time travel, as is Brianna and Roger. I am also using this book as a prompt for the quest game, and that will be Battlefield inspired. You could do anything that's inspired by the Battlefield section of the board on that game. And in this book, the Revolutionary War is approaching. Claire knows this is going to happen. She has told Jamie about it, and there are whispers of war brewing. There is a battle in here between Jamie's militia and the regulators. And even like in the very beginning, there's a quote about war. So totally works for war. And Battlefield inspired. In the previous book, the Frasers have returned to Fraser's Ridge, and from what I understand, this book is a lot of homesteading. It's more chill, it's more farming, it's more Brianna taking care of her new baby Jemmy. It's a lot of down-to-earth family stuff with rumbles of political situations going on in the background. And I've heard this is the weakest book in the series, but also I really loved the homesteading aspect of the previous book, so maybe I'll just read and vibe with this one. The next book that I plan on reading in July is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is the same author who wrote The Night Circus, which was my favorite book of 2023, so I have such high hopes for this book. Now, this would be a book that I am using for my library card prompt of magical realism with an at-sea or underwater setting, and also for the quest game for a magical realism book. Starless Sea is about a man named Zachary who finds a mysterious book that starts out like a fantasy book, but then begins to detail a story from his own childhood. And understandably disturbed, he starts seeking out more clues about this mysterious book. This investigation will lead him to a masquerade party where there is a doorway that will lead him to a new underworld. And there he will meet the people who have given their lives to protect this underworld. Magical realism is one of my absolute favorite genres. It almost never lets me down, so I'm really hoping this one will be good. The next book I am unsure about. I started listening to the audiobook for this and it was going way over my head, so I may sit down and try to actually physically read this one, or I might swap it out. And that book is The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity by David Graeber and David Wengrow. I started listening to this book and way over my head, okay? Maybe it's something I have to sit down and read and pay attention to, not something I can just casually listen to, but this is a book that is a prompt from my library card game, a non-fiction with a D title. And if I have to swap it out, then I'll do The Devil in the White City, but for now, we're still gonna stick with this one. The final book I plan on reading in July is I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. This is a classic sci-fi story, and I'm reading this as part of my Buzzwordathon pick for both the buzzword, which is punctuation. There is a comma, technically. Somewhere, there is a technical comma in here. I guess you have to look more at the spine to see it, but there is punctuation and also technology on the cover. Obviously, this is a robot with a bunch of wires. That will totally work. And this is a classic sci-fi novel. Prompt from the quest game that I'll be reading this for is Bookish Challenge, and my Bookish Challenge is the Buzzwordathon, so that all fits right in. And in this book, in the not too distant future, robots have become sentient. They're not just mindless helpers, they're not just soldiers, they are mindful and have some sort of humanity growing. The robots are aware of their intelligence, their power, and their humanity. As robots and humans struggle to survive together, the robots are continuing to seize power, and the humans are questioning the place technology and humans will have in the future. In the process of the robots becoming more powerful, humanity is becoming obsolete. And in this book, the question of what is humanity demands an answer. Somehow I have never seen the movie. I don't have any spoilers, but I'm sure there's going to be some pop culture references that have gone over my head in the past that'll be filled in after I read this. And it's a nice short read, so that'll break up some of these 500-page books that I have from my library card game. And that's it. Short and sweet this time. What are you reading in July? What are your summer reading plans? Let me know down below. Give me a comment, like, subscribe, and come back for more. Bye.